Hello, everyone. My name is Phil Blancato, and I'm CEO and President of Ladenburg Asset Management, Chief Market Strategist for Osaic. Welcome to another weekly market impact. Here we are on the precipice of, like I said this last week, the coolest holiday of the year. I mean, November 24th. Hard to believe we're already here. The year has just zipped on by. And Thanksgiving button up but a few days away. Very exciting time. Hopefully you're going to do something fun. Hopefully you're going to be enjoying yourself. In just a minute, I'll have Matt Crosby join me to talk about what he's going to do because that's a great story in and of itself. Just a few things to hit on, just to kick it off. First off, I hope your weekend was a nice one. I got a chance to head up to the country for a blink of an eye, my dad's old country house. It was kind of fun to be up there, and it's full on winter up there. It was in below freezing at night, and there's not a leaf left on the tree. So depending on where you live, that cold weather is coming south. No doubt about it. I did much. Believe it or not, there wasn't a lot to do for football this weekend. The Bulldogs had a good weekend. But nothing too crazy. They obviously beat Charlotte, not a big deal. But for all you football fans out there, I think this was a relatively quiet weekend. Other than the Cowboys winning against the Eagles last night, which I'm not a Cowboy fan. I have a bunch of buddies that are. I've never been a big Dallas Cowboy fan. It's a long story. But they came back to win, which is disappointing, while I was making lasagna. So last night I made my lasagna, and we have lasagna before turkey. And I used to make it with my dad, and now I've taken over that tradition. And this try, don't tell anybody, I mixed up the meats a little bit. I wanted to try something different. So I normally use two or three types of meat, always obviously beef, and I like a veal, and I like a little pork. But this year I used pork that already was seasoned, so almost like Italian sausage meat to a degree. I put that in there. A little bit of pancetta, which is chingana. It's basically like a sweet bacon, and that's to give a little more flavor. And then I browned them all together with a little good red wine, a little bit of garlic, a little bit of onion, just a little bit of carrot, which I don't do that either, just to sweeten it up. So that's my meat layer, and then fresh ricotta that was just made over the weekend, and then fresh mozzarella, and my lasagna, my own homemade sauce, which you all know about. So I put all that together, and I slow cook it at 350 for an hour, and then it's mostly cooked at that point. Then I'll warm it up on Thanksgiving and let it go half hour at 350, maybe three, depending, in the last 15 minutes with the foil off the top, so it browns the top, and then there's lasagna. So if you're in town, stop by for one of my homemade lasagnas. Good news, Marcella made it home this weekend, so that's exciting. And unfortunately, my wife is sick, but she's home and for Thanksgiving. And Luca has one more exam, one more test. I think it's an exam today, and she flies home tomorrow. So just like all the other millions of people that are traveling, 6 million people are going to fly for this Thanksgiving holiday alone. That you're looking at 81 million people traveling between now and the end of the year, potentially breaking records in number of people that are going to hit the roads. It's quite incredible to think about how much people are going to travel. And for all talk about recession and obviously a weaker U.S. economy and things that have been caused concern, believe it or not, I'm going to shock you with this stat. If I had to bet everybody on this call whether or not the stock market is up or down for the year, I'm going to guess most people would get it wrong. So believe it or not, as of the close of Friday, the quarter-to-date return on the S&P 500 is now negative 1.1%. The year-to-date return is still up over 13.5, so it's a solid number, high above the historical averages, so nothing to fret about there. And we're having a bit of a bounce back today. We had a bit of a bounce back on Friday. But small cap stocks in area really like, down 2.61%, only up 7% on the year, 7.5%. Those high flying growth stocks, the Nasdaq has been down 3 weeks in a row. Hard to believe that the high flying Nasdaq is having a tough time. And now for the quarter, down a whopping 163. It was up over 6% at one point. Now still up 16% on the year, but that was almost 19 at one point. So really good, really a bit of a reversal. The big high flying tech names have come under some pressure. And it's because, when we talked about this in the past, the price of companies divided by how much they earn has gotten really expensive. And for that reason, there's concern about, will the AI trade continue? Lisa Su came out, who's the CEO of AMD, which is another competitor to NVIDIA to some degree, said, I think we fail to realize that this is now a $1 trillion industry. There's been expectations that NVIDIA will go to become a $10 trillion company by 2030. I mean, these numbers are mind-boggling. It's 5 trillion now. Why? Because AI is in everything. And is there a bubble here? And I get this question a lot. I don't think there's a bubble in AI. I think some of the stocks have gotten really expensive, and I think it's difficult to see them go significantly higher. I think some of the names that support AI, whether it's data centers or electric companies or people making chips and wires and so on, the actual physical product. Well, I think that's okay. Maybe there's some high flyers in there too that have done really well. But are we going to stop using AI all of a sudden? Are people going to revolt because their electric bills are higher and try and no longer use it? It's probably going to be some upset people, and there might be a little less usage. Maybe there's some more controls that go in place, but it's not. This industry is just taking off. And at the beginnings of it, sure there'll be ebbs and flows, like last week in the market when we saw the Russell 1000 growth be down a whopping 2.85% in a single week. And yet the bond market, which no one ever wants to talk about, it's up 7% on the year. And last week bonds were up a half of 1%. So good, by the way, by being diversified, you did pretty well last week. My point is in this AI bubble stuff that happens all the time now, there's concern about it. I do think it's just normal to have volatility. I do think we'll have some ebbs and flows. But you have to look at the opportunities and ask yourself, do I want to be part of something that's, fundamentally changing the world? The interesting thing about this weekend, well, over the last week, Google, who's come in a bit of fire because of their size, launched Gemini 3. And Gemini 3 is, if you don't know Gemini, it is their product that they use for their version of AI. Well, supposedly Gemini 3 is better than Chat GPT. By the way, they all charge a fee, but the basic version is really very effective. And that, as of now, their AI modeling is better than every AI model on the street. And that's the claim that's being made. And so far, it's really quite impressive when you think about, how many people are actively using it. You look at shares of Alphabet, formerly known as Google, are up over 77% in the last 6 months. Why? Because it's quite impressive at being ability to deliver products that people care about. YouTube, which they bought for $500 billion, I want to say. No, I'm sorry, they bought it for 50 million. I'm going to get these numbers wrong. They bought it for a very insignificant amount of money. Now it's worth significantly more. And I read the piece that I'm missing out where I had that data point from. But my point is, you're looking at what Google did in AI, and now they have this new product called the Nano Banana Pro, which does everything. You go and tell it what you want, and it'll actually create a deck of slides. It's an animation tool that it really is quite impressive as to what it can do for you. My point is, these things are all going to make us more efficient. To be able to go and create a deck in maybe a fraction of the time is really quite impressive when you think about it. And I look at AI as this interesting scenario where we still don't really know what it's going to do for us. But I just saw this piece over the weekend about inflation being kind of sticky. And I think that's right. People still demanding to do things, whether it's travel, like I already opened up with, or more importantly, when you think about how AI can make our lives maybe less expensive. And I think that's going to be the fascinating thing. Will we end up have more productivity because in fact we have a scenario where you know you're lowering prices because we're more efficient, or we're getting more time because we're more efficient. So is there a bubble in AI? Sure. Some of the names probably gotten pretty frothy, and no doubt about it. But is the fact of the matter that it's revolutionary changing? I think so. More importantly, it's Thanksgiving. And Thanksgiving is a fun time of the year when we all get together. I think it's one of the coolest holidays that we have. And for that reason, I thought it would be fun to bring on a friend of mine, Matt Crosby. Matt, come on in, buddy. How you
How's it
doing?
going, Phil?
I'm doing okay. How are you? Now, Matt, I understand he just leaked it out to me here. You're going to be doing a lot of cooking on Thanksgiving. What's the story here, buddy?
I am. So I live with my girlfriend, and traditionally I would fly back home for Thanksgiving, but my parents are actually coming out to New York City for Thanksgiving this year. So I'll be hosting them. My little apartment, I'll be doing all the Thanksgiving cooking this year.
Wow, that's pretty cool. I mean, that's fun. I didn't know you. I've known Matt for a while, and I jokingly say he's a man of mystery because he's done a lot of really cool things in his life. But I think that's pretty amazing, Matt. I didn't know you like to cook. I mean, that's very exciting. Good for you, pal. I'm very happy to hear that.
I'll let you know how it goes on Friday. We'll don't praise me yet. We'll see if everything goes according to
Is
plan.
this your first shot at being like hosting the whole family? And first of all, have they met the girlfriend yet? That's a thing in itself. Oh,
they know her. So
okay.
no kind of surprises there. But in terms of, it'll be my first time hosting, not my first time cooking. I've helped my mom in the kitchen pretty much since I could walk, since I was 7 or 8 years old. Well, I guess I could walk before then, but since I was old enough to hold a spatula, I've been helping in the kitchen. So hopefully some of that skill has stayed with me.
That's awesome. I'm happy to hear that, buddy. Good for you. That's good stuff. Well, Matt took some time and he wrote one of our more interesting white papers on, we call them, it's kind of hot topics, but we about Thanksgiving and the costs about what we're all feeling from inflation. So it's a fun comparative. You heard the president come out famously and say, that this year the prices are down and Walmart said things are a lot cheaper. And we thought we'd do our own research and see how real some of this stuff is. So Matt, when you looked at what happened right now, prices that you paid for yourself versus last year, how are prices looking? And more broadly, if you compare them to last year, more expensive, less expensive, or the same?
Well, there's an interesting bifurcation because consumers think that prices are more expensive. 7 in 10 Americans think that they'll be spending more this year due to tariffs, inflation, other reasons in the economy. But if you look at the actual hard data, Thanksgiving is going to be slightly cheaper than it was last year. So starting off with the big item, the bird, in terms of costs, those have declined versus last year for the same pound for pound dollar amount for turkeys. So we're seeing big decreases there, but we're also seeing declines in things like cranberries. We're seeing declines in things like stuffing, essentially coming from grain prices. Where we are seeing some increases in some goods, things like butter, which is obviously not a dish in and of itself, but used to prepare most of them. Things like heavy cream, also a dairy-related product, or even people who don't eat turkeys who instead substitute that for ham, maybe. We're seeing prices rise for those goods. So, but across the board, more broadly, Thanksgiving holiday prices are coming down this year.
That means people are going to be buying canned cranberries this year in mass. I read a piece over the weekend that talked about why people love canned cranberries. They strip out the seeds, they strip out the skins, and they add cornstarch, and then they press it. And they come up with this weird version of it. Now, natural cranberries, when you make it yourself, less sugar, better for you. But yet people love those canned cranberries. Ben Dennis, who joined me on a call a couple weeks ago, loves canned cranberry. Not my thing. Do you like canned cranberries, man?
It tastes processed, too processed to me. I'm a fresh cranberry kind of guy.
I'm with you, buddy. I'm with you on those. But I guess because it's going to be a little cheaper, people may buy more canned cranberries. Good for them. So then it comes back to the consumer, Matt. When you look at the consumer right now, what do you think the consumer shapes up like for the rest of the year?
That's a good question. I mean, one thing I'd point out is what you were talking to just a couple minutes ago with the amount of people traveling. That's always been a good telltale sign of how the consumer is doing, whether or not they're still traveling for the holidays, right? The more pinched your budget is, the more squeezed you're feeling, the less willing you are to go out and travel, the more like you are to just stay home and enjoy it with friends or family who's close by. So I think the fact that consumers are still traveling is a good sign. And I also think the fact that we had a really strong back to school spending season and Halloween spending season is also a good tailwind for consumers as we head into the last couple months of the year.
So that means we end up in a scenario where, remember, but as the consumer spends, we grow or shrink. And there's a lot of folks out there worried about recession, which is kind of mind-boggling to me. Now, I'll talk about labor in a minute. That labor's certainly weakened a bit. But, as long as the consumer continues to be strong, exemplary by the number of people hitting the road, 81 million people, driving around, and then the money being spent on Thanksgiving, to Matt's point, as the consumer spends, we grow or shrink. And I think that's a very important aspect that we still are at full employment. Unemployment today, while it ticked up in this last report to 4.4%, it's still below the averages of 6%, and there are still jobs available. So my point is when wages are above the rate of inflation as they have been, and they still continue to be lower than they were over 8 of the last 10 years, the consumer tends to be strong. And I think that's Matt's point about into the end of the year. It looks like so far we are dealing with a relatively strong consumer with spending maybe being as much as $1 trillion through the end of this year. Quite incredible. Well, then, Matt, just for fun, what's the difference between a heritage turkey and a normal turkey? Because I have no idea.
This is a conversation that Aiden Redmond from our team and I had after we kind of announced internally what this white paper was going to be about. Aiden, the first question he asked was, "Well, are you looking at the cost of a heritage turkey or a normal turkey?" And that was my response too, Phil. I was like, I have no clue. But a heritage turkey essentially is the one that has that really red wattle. It's a naturally raised turkey. If you looked up pictures of turkeys, that's probably what would come up, versus 99% of what you see in a store is going to be that farm raised, or even if it's a natural grazing turkey, it's going to be more of a poultry turkey. So essentially what you're seeing in on your plate on Thanksgiving is not the classic quintessential old school turkey.
Okay. All right. So I get that. I mean, you see the turkeys that are in, kind of in a pen, they're all white, where natural turkeys are black or dark
Right.
brown generally. So that's kind of interesting. But all right. All right. So I mean, I wonder if there's any difference in flavor. I guess I don't
You
like.
know, the heritage turkeys have a little bit more, it's a more even ratio of dark meat to light meat, whereas the farm raised turkeys are more white meat. So it's supposed to be a little bit juicier, a little bit richer of a texture. I've never had one, so I can't confirm that.
I've had wild turkey. It's a long story. We do some hunting as a family, and my dad shot one many years ago. I've tried a few times and never shot one because they're really hard to get. And it was quite good. So maybe I kind of had a heritage, but not actually buying a heritage. So who knows? Last thing for you, Matt. While I have you, I know we've done a lot of work on whether the stock market is expensive or cheap. And while I have you, I'm curious. Yeah, I talked about in the beginning. I don't think there's an AI bubble, but I certainly, would love to hear your thoughts on, the market here is in a transition phase. We've had a rough couple of weeks because of some, I think, valuations and worried about AI. I don't think we're in one, but while I have you, what do you think?
You know, I don't think we're in one either, Phil. And to me, this is just a reminder to stay invested through the market turbulence. You know, if you take a look at the past week, 2 weeks, it's been rough. We've had three consecutive declining weeks, as you noted, for the Nasdaq, but that's not indicative of necessarily an underlying problem. I mean, we talk about this a lot. If you look at the fundamental earnings growth, you look at the fundamental underlying economic growth of both markets and the economy at large, they're both doing pretty well. The consumer is remaining resilient through the end of the year, so I think that hopefully leads to a strong stock market going forward.
I think that's right. And I will be honest with everybody. I do think we're in a scenario, I know you think, Matt, where we just go back to average on stock market returns of 8%. And we need earnings to lift up. So that process of going back to the average is a volatile one, and certainly we have this dominance of AI and the AI companies, but I do think there's something to be said for going back to normal returns, and which means actively managed portfolios like we offer, I think will be valuable. For those of you managing your own money, small caps are still really cheap. And on risk on days like today, small caps are the winner. When risk off days, they're the loser. But that's what you do get from investing in small caps. If we get the Fed to cut rates here, I'll ask you one more time, Matt. I think it's a long shot that they cut, but if they cut because of a weaker labor market, I'm not sure that's the best thing for stocks, but it probably means smaller companies will ultimately do better. I mean, what do you think of that?
Yeah, that's a good question on why the Fed is cutting rates. Is it because inflation is coming down or is it because the economy is weakening? I would say if it's because inflation is coming down, that's kind of the best case scenario, right? That's the rising tide lifts all boats, but you're probably going to see small caps perform even better. But in that second scenario where you have a weakening labor market, you might see some broad weakness from equities, I think at least to close out the year. But into next year, once they realize that underlying fundamentals are still strong, small caps still have stronger earnings growth relative to larger companies, and even through the first quarter or second quarter of next year, if we see inflation start to come back down, even more justifying further rate cuts, I think you still, in the long term or in the mid to long term, you still see some small cap outperformance.
Yeah, I think that's right. And Matt, on something important. Normally we get these wonderful December rallies. With the market being as elevated as it is, I don't know that we expect one this year, especially as we're in this kind of waiting game for the Federal Reserve to make a decision. So I do think there's something to be said for, being careful about taking profits here, pivoting to other allocations of your portfolio, maybe owning some fixed income, which tend to do quite well when interest rates are falling. And I think diversifying your portfolio at a time to mitigate risk right now is terribly important. Well, Matt, good luck with cooking Thanksgiving dinner, buddy. That's exciting stuff. I can't wait to hear how it goes.
I will keep you up to date, Phil. Thank
We're
you.
in the same camp, by the way. I cook my own turkey. I'm the turkey expert in the house, and my key is the brine. I brine mine in a brining liquid. If you haven't taken your turkey out and defrosted it already, I do recommend it. Throw it in the fridge, defrost it now. You want it nice and warm, but not warm. You want it not frozen by the time you. I'm a big fan of brining. Trick for brining, I add a little bit of maple syrup to the water. That's a big difference. And it sounds strange, but give a little bit of sweetness to it. And then I slow cook it on a grill. Now, my other secret is underneath the skin, between the skin and the breast, I have this mixture of Grey Poupon, garlic, olive oil, butter, parsley, fennel. parsley, rosemary. I mix it all together, get it a little soft enough to really work it in there in between the skin, and then I slow cook it on the grill. Now, here's my real trick. I start with the breast down for an hour and then flip it for an hour and a half with the breast up so the breasts don't get overly dry. 2.5 hours at like 275 degrees with the burners on the outside on and the turkey in the middle so it does a convection and perfect. I do recommend thermometers though. I put one in the breast and one in the leg. You want to get that bird to the right temperature and then take it off. Well, Matt, I'm
That's
pretty sure you're going to nail this.
it's good to know, Phil. I've been writing down these tips, so hopefully
I don't think you're a smart guy. Thanks for joining me, Matt. Happy Thanksgiving, buddy.
Thanks, Phil. Happy Thanksgiving.
Some other fun data points. I read a piece over the weekend that talked about CEO confidence. And when I look at oh, Matt, by the way, don't leave me yet. Stick around. I'm going to have you do a shout out of the week here when we get to the end in about 5 minutes. I need your own shout out of the week. So um, don't give up on me yet. I may have you come on here in just a sec.
All right, will do.
All right. So, well, a couple of things I picked up on CEO confidence, and the reason why I'm hinting is our sentiment around executives is that there was a lot of concern about tariffs early on and what it might do to their bottom line, and that really seems to have calmed down. So, and you look at the shares of earnings calls that are now talking about tariffs, that number was almost 60% back in May, and now it's only down to about 20. So this tariff stuff seems to be fading away and there's been new resolutions that have come out along the way that seem to be making things less impactful. I'm excited about that because I do think it's relevant to the health of the economy, the health of the market, and for these concerns that are starting to pop up about recession, I'm struggling with that. You don't get recessions unless you get a significantly weaker labor force or you get breakage in the U.S. economy. The I'm sorry, the financial crisis we had in 2008 when we had the banks, really in a bad place because of what happened with loans that were inappropriate or so on. To not get into that, we've talked about that quite a bit. And I think what's happened now is we end up in this scenario where there's a lot of call it is politics in here that want to see a recession. It feels like because they think it's going to dislodge the president because there's some who love him and some who hate him. It's split down the middle. But when you look at the latest job data, the unemployment rate right now, as I mentioned earlier, is ticking. It has ticked up a bit. We were down at 3.2%. Now we're up there at 4.4. So it has come up about a percent. And it's the highest level now. We just finally got some data as the government's reopened in the last 4 years. And it's certainly when you look at things like jobs that are hard to get minus jobs that are plentiful, that number is increasing. So, lower rung jobs usually are more plentiful than harder jobs that pay more. And you look at continuing claims. I do look at this a lot. How many people are filing for new benefits every single month? That number is pushed higher. In fact, it's pushed up to 1.9,700,000. That's a new cycle high. So I'm worried about that number, but it's still not real breakage. Generally this time of year we do see unemployment get better because there's a lot of temp hiring and jobs being added to help with the fourth quarter spending season. But I'm also a bit concerned that some of this data is just wonky. And the reason why, what's happened recently that would tell me, maybe the data's not right. And by that, I mean specifically the government shutdown and how many companies actually reported good data. Remember, we talked about survey data being way off, that we're not seeing the kind of numbers from the survey data that we should. So I think that's something. I mean, how many companies are reporting good data? That's something that I take with a grain of salt. So, all right. So enough about markets this week. We've been on here for a while. Matt did a great job telling you that things I think are okay out there. Are they phenomenal? No. Are they terrible? No. And I think that's the key takeaway from this week. And take profits when you can. Some fun headlines. Ukraine seems like there may be the beginnings of a peace negotiation. We'll see where Ukraine, Russia. I think it's a long way away, but it's okay. I mean, at least that's the beginning of that. Think about what that would do for the global economy and for markets if we can resolve, especially the oil market. My daughters are big Wicked fans. $150 million box office opening weekend. Big numbers. Is the consumer fatigue? You could tie a lot of this stuff back, and it's just not. They're just not right now. They're willing to spend on things they really care about. I'll give you another fun stat. Holiday season, right? 187 million consumers are expected to shop from now through the end of the year. I mean, these numbers are just they're just crazy. They're real numbers, and I think sometimes we get too caught up in some of the minutia of the day to day. Most people who want a job have a job, and most people have, the opportunity to make more money because of the last few years. That's certain there was a shortage of labor. Now that labor's evened off, it's not. I think it's just one of these things that we should be smart about keeping it to the fact. And sometimes we forget we just don't keep it to the fact. All right, a couple more headlines that I can't help myself talk about. The Trump Mandami meeting blew off. I mean, New York, I have so many people ask me about, is New York going to implode because we have a socialist mayor? No, it's not going to implode. It's one of the biggest economic engines in the country. Is he going to try and tweak it and make it a little affordable? Sure. Have rents in New York City are ridiculous. Can he really fix that? Probably not. But to credit both guys, one very left, one very right, they met in the middle, and it tells me maybe we're just not as bad as we say we are. Maybe there is the ability to have some sort of meeting of the minds in the middle on certain hot topics, like whether it's Russia, Ukraine, or the costs of things. Let's hope it's a sign of better things to come with our politics because they're tough, really difficult. And then, just a couple of other things that I can't help myself. I've read a lot about Social Security lately because I get a lot of people ask me about this question. And the question is, if for the Social Security system, am I better off taking it at 62 or waiting till longer? Please listen to me. This is very important. If you're healthy, the longer you wait, the more money you make. In fact, if you look at your amount of money you get at 62 versus say 70, it's a double. So if you're in a scenario where, okay, maybe you're not super healthy, you want to take it earlier, I understand it. Maybe in a scenario where you just need the extra income and you're willing to sacrifice higher returns later, I get it. But this notion about taking it at 62, using the money, investing it in the stock market to grow it a whole bunch, and that long term you'd be better off, the math is not true. You got to look at what average returns of markets have been, not what it did the last 10 years. You got to look at the amount of the averages. If you make it to year 70, 72 specifically, you've got something like a 70% chance of making it to 90. So if your health is good, you're much better off waiting for a much higher number. By working longer is better for you mentally and physically. So I think this notion, I've seen a lot of this lately about people saying, I'm going to take my money early from Social Security and then go invest it in the market. I think that's just wrong. Wrong. That's not right. There are other factors. I get it, but I hate to see people make decisions on this. All right, Matt, come back on, buddy. I need you back on here, Matt. Who is your shout out of the week? You better not take mine, because if you do, I'm gonna be mad at you.
Phil, I'm gonna have to give mine to my girlfriend this week. She's been very helpful getting everything prepared for Thanksgiving for my parents coming out, and she made a delicious half cheesecake, half chocolate cake, like a layered cake. So that's kind of our centerpiece dessert for Thanksgiving weekend.
All right. Well, what's your girlfriend's first name? You don't have to give me her last name. She's a D1 athlete, so she's out there in the world.
Her name is Elle. Her
L.
name is
Okay.
Elle.
Kudos to L. Mine's a little different. I'm going to give mine to President Lincoln. And the reason why I'm going to give mine to President Lincoln, because in 1863, President Lincoln declared that Thanksgiving would be a national holiday. And why I say that? Because it's our holiday. It's not Christmas. It's not New Year's. It's not, it's kind of like 4th of July to some degree. But this one's uniquely American. And I think that's pretty cool when you think about it. This is the one time of year everybody chills out, and hopefully you're home, you're enjoying your friends and family, or just maybe reflecting back, a chance to reconnect with friends and family, or just do your own thing, enjoy the fall, enjoy the wonderful happy the beginning of the holiday season. It's just, to me, it's the fuse of the firecracker that lights off this time of year, which is just fun. So kudos to President Lincoln for giving us a holiday that I think is purely American and exciting in a way for all of us to reconnect a little bit and stop yelling at each other. Hopefully next week I'll find that stat about YouTube, because it's pretty incredible, the number. Anyway, more importantly, Matt, thank you for joining me today. Much appreciated. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family.
Happy Thanksgiving, Phil.
For the rest of you, if you're not having lasagna, that's okay. Enjoy your holiday season. And I do mean this sincerely. Maybe do take a minute and say thanks. I know I will, for all the wonderful things that we've been given in life. As an American, I still would argue that we are far and away the best country in the world. We have the greatest opportunities still. Are we perfect? Of course we're not. But my mom and dad were immigrants. Immigrants, if you talk to me, you've heard me talk a lot about. I still see young immigrants coming here and still having success. We still grow as a country. We're the most diversified economy in the world. Yeah, we tweak the system and change it. I know people are fired up about the redistricting in California and in Texas. This stuff is worthwhile paying attention to, but it certainly doesn't take away from the American story. And I think Thanksgiving is emblematic of that. Or if nothing else, a chance to enjoy some time with friends and family. I know I will. My sister will be over. We'll have a nice group of, I think, 12. We used to be 20, but things change. My brother's going to miss it this year. He's off with his daughter. Can't make it up. Then I'll go spend some time with my uncle and cousins. We do this annual trip to my dad's country cabin, and we'll spend, a couple of nights up there, about 20 of us, reconnecting and laughing and having a good time. Because in the end, that's what matters most. Don't get me wrong. I love this job of mine, stock market and helping you make money, but it is about all the other stuff that matters even more. Have a wonderful, healthy, and happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Take care. Thank you.